Today, we're jumping into a truly incredible story. We're talking about a 70-year journey of defiance, debate, and immense sacrifice. It's a story that didn't just reshape an empire, it actually gave birth to one of the world's largest democracies. So, yeah, let's dive right in.
But that whole journey starts with a massive question. I mean, look at this crowd. How do you actually pull that off? How do you get hundreds of millions of people with different languages, religions, and backgrounds to all pull together for one single cause? That's the huge challenge we're going to explore.
So, our story really kicks off in the late 1800s. Now, sure, there had been plenty of resistance to the British before this, but something new was happening here. An organized, national consciousness was starting to bubble up. The very idea of India as one single country, one people, was really beginning to take hold. And look, this wasn't some overnight thing. It was more like a slow burn, catching fire in different places all across the subcontinent. There was this deep, growing frustration with British rule that was just about to hit a boiling point. The feeling was spreading that the government wasn't there for Indians. It was there for itself. And a few specific policies really poured fuel on that fire, creating this shared sense of injustice. The Arms Act, that was seen as a huge sign of mistrust. The Vernacular Press Act was a straight-up attack on free speech. But honestly, the Ilbert Bill controversy might have been the most telling. All the bill wanted to do was let Indian judges oversee cases with Europeans, a basic step toward equality. But when the government yanked it back because of backlash from the white community, well, that just laid bare the deep-seated racism of the whole system. And here's the crucial part. Out of all that shared anger, a powerful new idea started to bring people together: sovereignty. This wasn't just about getting better policies anymore. It was about who had the fundamental right to make decisions for India. And the answer, more and more, was becoming the Indian people themselves. Okay, so you've got this growing desire for a voice, right? But it needed a platform. And that brings us to our next phase, the creation of a national group to channel all these feelings. That group was the Indian National Congress, and it quickly became the heart of the movement, though, believe me, it had plenty of its own internal arguments.
So, in 1885, a bunch of English-educated professionals, we're talking lawyers, teachers, journalists, they all got together and formed the Indian National Congress. At first, they weren't exactly screaming for independence, but it was the first organization that really tried to speak for all the people of India, demanding a bigger say in how they were governed. And right away, you see this major split in how to get things done. On one side, you have the moderates. They believed in a slow, steady, constitutional approach, petitions, appeals, that sort of thing. But on the other side, you've got the radicals. They thought that was totally weak and ineffective. They actually called it the politics of prayers and basically said, no, we have to rely on our own strength and fight for Swaraj, which means self-rule. And one of the loudest, most powerful voices for the radical cause was this man, Bal Gangadhar Tilak. Through his newspaper, Kesari, he became this fierce critic of British rule, and he totally lit a fire under a new generation, pushing them to demand more. And this quote from him, wow, it just perfectly captures that shift in attitude. This isn't a polite request anymore. It's a bold, non-negotiable demand for freedom. A declaration like that, it sent a jolt of electricity through the whole national movement. The real turning point, the thing that pushed the radicals' methods to the front, was the British decision to partition Bengal in 1905. The outrage was massive and immediate. It sparked what was called the Swadeshi movement. And this was a totally new kind of protest, boycotting British goods, promoting Indian-made stuff. It was a way of showing the economic muscle of mass action. So the stage was set for a whole new era. The old tactics of writing petitions and having debates were starting to feel outdated. Now it was about strikes, boycotts, and nationwide movements. The struggle was about to spill out of the meeting rooms and onto the streets, into the villages, and across the fields. And the person who would come to define this new era was, of course, Mahatma Gandhi. When he came back to India from South Africa in 1915, he brought this unique philosophy of nonviolent resistance called satyagraha. That, plus his incredible ability to connect with everyday people, was about to change Indian politics forever. Under Gandhi's leadership, the struggle morphed into three huge waves of protest. First up was the non-cooperation movement. Then came civil disobedience, which famously kicked off with the Dandi Salt March. And finally, the Quit India movement.
Each one was bigger and posed a more serious challenge to British rule than the one before it. But it's really important to remember that while Gandhi's nonviolent path was central, it wasn't the only one. At the same time, you had revolutionaries like Bhagat Singh, who felt that something more drastic was needed. Their goal, as he put it, wasn't to hurt anyone, but to create a shockwave, a symbolic act, to make the deaf hear and force the government to listen. This whole period saw just incredible participation from every corner of society. That picture on the left shows the huge protests against the Simon Commission, which was this all-British group sent to decide India's future without a single Indian member. I mean, what an insult, right? And guiding these massive movements was a new generation of leaders like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel on the right, who was an absolute master at organizing people and building up the Congress Party. The movement also brought in leaders from every community. Here you can see Maulana Azad, a deeply respected Islamic scholar, with Gandhi. Azad was a huge champion for Hindu-Muslim unity. He truly believed that a free India had to be a united India, and that was a core belief of the Gandhian movement. But as freedom got closer and closer, that very idea of unity faced its biggest test yet. The final decade of the struggle was messy. It was a complicated and often tragic time, where the dream of independence got all tangled up with the nightmare of division. By the 1940s, the whole political game had changed. The Muslim League started arguing that Muslim interests were separate and wouldn't be protected in a Hindu-majority India. And in 1940, they made it official. They passed a resolution demanding independent states in the Muslim-majority parts of the country. Suddenly, the idea of splitting the country was officially on the table. This picture just captures the tension of those final years perfectly. You've got C. Rajagopachari and Gandhi talking just before some really critical negotiations with the Muslim League's leader, Muhammad Ali Jinnah. But no matter how many times they talked, they just couldn't bridge the gap between Congress's vision of one united India and the League's demand for a separate nation. And then, after all those decades of struggle, it happened. The British left. On August 15, 1947, India finally achieved its independence. It was a moment of just unbelievable triumph and celebration. But that triumph was immediately overshadowed by tragedy. Independence came with a condition: partition. The subcontinent was divided into India and Pakistan, and what followed was one of the biggest, most violent mass migrations in all of human history. This photo, it's haunting. It shows just a tiny fraction of the millions who lost their homes. The human cost of freedom was just staggering. So, that's the thing to remember. 1947 wasn't just a simple victory. It was this moment of two intense, opposite feelings at once. The absolute joy of freedom was completely mixed up with the agony of division. It's like the new nation was born with both of these things: the power of unity and the trauma of being torn apart, fused right into its DNA. And that leaves us with a pretty big question, doesn't it? A nation that was forged in the fire of a long freedom struggle, but was also born in the flames of partition. Well, that's a unique inheritance. So how does that history, a story of both incredible unity and devastating division, keep shaping its path forward?